much for coming and being here. I'd like to give a round of applause to our first two speakers. Excited for the night. It's very humbling to be able to stand here and speak to you tonight. Great picture. I forgot I was actually going to be coming up. I'm here today to talk to you about being lost and found. That's the topic of today. Tell your story about being lost and found. And while doing some work on this topic this week, I came up with some other questions I've had about being lost and found and how that plays into more aspects than maybe just emotionally or mentally. So I'm going to talk to you about a few questions I've asked myself this week about that, and then I'm going to tell you a little personal story about a moment in my life that is isolated and always stands out as a true moment of me being lost and found. I'd like to start off by asking one of the questions I came up with was, why love? Why do you fall in love? Why do you experience love? Many times it's painful and it makes you jaded and skeptical and hurts after when you get hurt and you fall out of love. And you're born into love, and it's very tough because when you're born into it, you're born into that realm of love being forced on you, and you were created by love, and you have not really your own mindset about where you should be going with love. And I believe you're very lost when you first are experimenting with love. You date the wrong people, you get involved with the right people, it doesn't work. And through trial and error, you discover your identity and what love means to you. So even though you were made by love and came into the world of love and shown love and how you should love, I feel like a way to be found is for you to experiment and through trial and error, discover that love. So that was one way I thought about being lost and found, that feeling of trying to find your identity in other avenues. Another question I thought of was a more materialistic one. Why buy expensive clothes or like material goods like flat screen TVs? And I came to the conclusion it was similar to the idea of love, that you're born into this world where you're forced into certain clothes. You try your things. Like, it took me years to be able to fit into these skinny jeans. And like, I forced myself into it and I'm very comfortable in it now, but like, looking back 10 years ago, pictures of myself, I look and I shake my head like, what was I doing? I was balding and I tried to give myself a mohawk. And I was fighting my balding with every inch I had. And it took me a while to realize that being bald, I actually found myself and found that I was comfortable being bald. And so I think there's a lot of different avenues you can take about being lost and found in life. And like I said, it's not just maybe necessarily about something negative in your life. It could be a positive thing, like you finding your identity. Another thing I come to the conclusion of is I've been using the idea of pain and beauty interchangeably with the idea of being lost and found, because I feel like pain battles with beauty. And anyone who's read my blog post this week, I was touching upon this a little bit. I've just been fascinated with the idea of pain and beauty. And I feel like when you experience something painful, you lose that beauty. And you try to find that beauty again by going through that pain. And it's so easy to get lost. And that was another question, like, why is it so easy to get lost and so much harder to find yourself? And I think it's because the adventure and the journey you have to take pushes you past your comfort level and moves you past the horizon of where you previously were. So back to pain and beauty. When you have that pain, you try to crawl your way back to that moment of beauty that you feel was robbed from you or taken from you. And then the beautiful part is, due to that pain you're experiencing or that loss, your perception and your priorities alter and shift. So that beauty you were once seeking now has altered or changed into something that you were not even aware of. So you actually cruise past that one moment that you were seeking that you didn't even know you could cruise past, and you start a new baseline at a new part in your life. And you feel very confident and cool because you're like, wait a minute, like, I can handle myself. And like, you take that and you store it away, that you were able to make it past that one point of pain and find the beauty in that. And now I'd like to tell you a little story about me being lost and found. It happened back in late January, the first week of February of 2009. My father had been passed away for 4 years already. My mother had colon cancer. She had surgery and she was currently in remission. and I was en route to move to Florida to be a boat cleaner. Not that I wanted to be a boat cleaner per se, I just wanted to get out of Rhode Island. This place I thought was my pain. I felt very lost here. I felt like I'd be trapped here forever, and just the idea of being suffocated, in my mind, that's how I viewed Rhode Island, and I wanted to get out. And two weeks before I put my 2 weeks in, my mother called me and said she was having issues walking. She couldn't raise her arms, and her face had started to droop. And after going to her oncologist and getting tested, it was discovered that she had a brain tumor the size of a tennis ball on her motor skills line right in the middle of her head. So it was messing with every function she was trying to do. And that was a very scary moment, because now at that point in my life, I knew too much to be naive anymore about how cancer operated. After losing my father, I was so blind while he was sick and after he passed, that now everything that happened to my mother, she was diagnosed at the same year he was at 49. And so I was always waiting for the other shoe to fall. So this was very traumatic. So I stayed in Rhode Island, and the week my mother went into the hospital for her brain tumor surgery, my grandmother went into the hospital for back pains, and believe it or not, she ended up getting diagnosed with tumors all over her body. So they ended up having to admit her and keep her in the hospital for a week. Which, one good thing was they were both at Rhode Island Hospital, so it made visiting them super easy, which I was thankful for. And everything for my mother went very well. She was always very lucky with her surgeries, and it was very traumatic and stressful time waiting for her to come out of the surgery. When she came out, she was in the ICU for only 2 days, and then she was allowed to go home. And my grandmother, who was still in the hospital, she was where she needed to be, and we were taking care of my grandfather. And now, this is where the story gets a little more interesting. It was the first weekend my mother was home, and I got a phone call while I was at work. I used to work at Frank's Town Line, right there on Post Road.
I know, I went there a lot.
And when my brother had called me, and it's weird, you have this sixth sense, or this intuition of when someone calls you, and you can tell by their tone of voice how that phone call will be and what's going on. And it's like an unwritten code that you don't explain the circumstances that you have to report to immediately. You just get the phone call and say you have to go to Rhode Island Hospital right now. So I left, and the whole car ride there, my expectations and uncertainty of what was to follow. Was it my grandmother? Was it my mom? Those were the only two I was toying with, and I was trying to piece together what happened. I remember that car ride was so long, even though there was no traffic, and I think I did 110 the whole way there. And upon getting to the hospital, I ran to my family. My aunt was there, and my mom was there. She was still wrapped up in her bandages. And my grandfather had passed away, my grandma's husband. And I remember being blown away, and we all just looked at each other like, you have got to be kidding me. How much are we supposed to go through in this 1 week? And he had died of a heart attack. He had called my aunt earlier in the morning and said he was tired of being alone, and he was lonely, and he didn't feel well. And we ended up calling the police and ambulance to come to his house, and by the time they got there, he had already passed away. And so that was a very, very traumatic, stressful time in my life. That's where I started to lose my hair. I have pinpointed it to that time, full circle to the bald. And so, as I said before, I was supposed to move to Florida on Super Bowl Sunday. And I was working that day. I don't know who played, because I don't follow sports, which is why I was moving on Super Bowl Sunday. And I was a mess. I felt like my world crashing down around me. And I'm not one for self-pity or to wallow in my sadness, but there was so much in such a short period of time between Florida getting taken away, my mother having another brain tumor, my grandmother having cancer all over her body, and my grandfather passing away. I just looked at the world in a different light that day, and all I remember thinking was, I don't want to be here anymore. And I remember it was such a strong feeling to end my life that day, and it still scared me every now and then to think about how strong that urge was. But it was also, that day I remember, it was a sort of beautiful urge, because I felt like through that pain, there was the idea of beauty, that I would have the final say in how I went. I wouldn't have to have cancer or have a heart attack, and all this death and cancer around me really changed my mindset and made me realize that life can really throw you some curveballs, and even though you can't change life, you have to change how you react to life and change how you have to alter yourself to life. But I remember that day I called my mother and said goodbye to her, and it was a very weird phone call because she could tell, just like I was talking about with my brother before, when you get that sixth sense, that intuition on the phone about how the phone call went. And it was a very sad moment. As you can tell, I never actually did anything. I sat in my car that night, and I cried my eyes out. I just sat in the parking lot by myself, and I just thought of a million reasons not to do it, and I could think of 2 million reasons to do it. But I kept coming to the conclusion that I couldn't stay lost because there was so much pain that I've already had in my life that I can use as a building block and as a chance to move forward, that I shouldn't end it now because I have already been through what I viewed the worst of it. I lost my father, my mother is back in remission, and my grandfather has passed away, and there's nothing I can do about that. And I also kept thinking about the things I had to do in the morning, and I had a terrible coffee that day, and I kept thinking, I don't want to go on this note. This coffee ruined my day already. And it was a very torn moment, but it was a very beautiful moment where I was very lost, and then I ended up getting found. And I wanted to just share that with you, and thank you very much.